Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Abby Koss, and I'll be handling the beginning of this presentation before we hand it over to our hosts for the day, Lisa Sanders and Carol Byrd-Bredbenner. But before we get the webinar kicked off, please take a moment to make sure that your computer is set up properly, your audio is working. If you're going to dial in through telephone, please go ahead and dial the number that was provided to you in the email generated by GoToWebinar. And after today's presentation, in a couple of weeks, we'll be adding the presentation slides, links to the resources that are called out in the end of this presentation, and a continuing education unit form at www.kelloggnutrition.com. This is Bringing Back the Basics, Cereal Breakfast, and Healthy Routines. Let me take a moment to introduce today's moderators and presenters. We have Lisa Sanders, PhD, RD, and she is the Director of Global Nutrition and Scientific Affairs, as well as a business partner for corporate communications at Kellogg. And so she's really responsible for helping to communicate the nutrition story of Kellogg globally, and she also supports other global efforts, primarily around the benefits and relevance of cereal and other foods. Before she was in this position, she was a senior nutrition scientist at Kellogg and spent some time at Tate & Lyle, where she focused on dietary fiber and digestive health. She's a member of IFT, A&D, and ASN. Carol Byrd-Bredbenner, PhD, RD, FADA, is a member of the Kellogg Breakfast Council, and she's also a professor of nutrition and an extension specialist in the Nutritional Sciences Department at Rutgers, where she teaches undergraduate and graduate courses. And her research really focuses on taking a look at the impact of both cognitive and environmental factors, so things like portion control, advertising, on our dietary behaviors and our health outcomes, and then developing some recommendations for both nutrition, communications, and health promotion efforts. We'll be taking questions throughout the event, but we're only going to address them at the end. So please, if at any point you have a question, please feel free to type those questions into the question box that should be popped up on the side of your screen. I'll take those, copy them down, save them, and then at the end of the webinar, as long as time is still available, we'll go through that list and try to get to everyone's questions. To give you an overview of what we're going to be discussing today, first we're going to learn about how and why breakfast in America is changing. We're going to take a look at some of the latest research about the role of breakfast and breakfast cereal on health, and that includes special focuses on body weight and BMI, research around digestive health, as well as cardiometabolic health. Then we'll take a look at identifying how breakfast cereal can and does contribute to improved nutrient intake. And after all of that, we'll share some strategies for bringing people back to breakfast. And this is particularly relevant for anyone who's working with a client base. Lots of smart ways to integrate breakfast into a healthy diet. So first, let's start out by learning how and why breakfast in America is changing. And let me hand it over to Lisa.
Realize when they have a better start to their day with breakfast, they feel less irritable, less tired, less sluggish. So if you take a look at the table on the right, this covers the top items that are consumed at breakfast. So you can see these are the top 10 items, coffee being number 1, cereal, fruit juice, milk, bread, and toast. These are some of the common things that are consumed for breakfast each morning. But breakfast in America is changing, and these are 3 topics we're going to discuss briefly that have seen a lot of changes, at least in the past decade. Breakfast consumption really declines as children get older, and we'll touch a bit more on that as well. There is, because of this awareness of the importance of breakfast, especially for children, this has really changed the environment at schools and providing breakfast at schools. So we'll talk a bit about what is going on in the schools around breakfast. And then also a very recent trend is more Americans are eating breakfast outside the home, and as a result, quick service restaurants have really increased their breakfast offerings. So we'll talk about how that has changed recently. So for the first point, breakfast consumption declines as children get older. So it's really important for health professionals to realize this because it's something very simple to recommend for children when you're talking to them about diet. Just getting them to eat breakfast is so important. So if you think back to what I mentioned earlier, that 1 in 10 Americans are not eating breakfast, among teenagers, it's closer to 6 out of 10 teenagers are not consuming breakfast every day. So while most toddlers and preschool-age children are eating breakfast, breakfast consumption really drops as children get older, to around 50% in the middle school years and 36%, less than half of high school students, are starting their day with breakfast. So you can see that the decline happens very rapidly. And in fact, a recent study earlier this year found that they studied children from 4th to 6th grade and found that that breakfast really decreased. 64% of the children in 4th grade were eating breakfast. This went down to 56% in 5th grade, and by the time they hit 6th grade, only 42%. So it declines very rapidly, and it's a real concern. So because of this awareness that more kids are skipping breakfast and there's a need for children to have breakfast, that it's very important, there's been a change in the school breakfast programs, actually. So, 1 in 5 children may start their day without breakfast, and so school breakfast programs have steadily increased over the past decade, and the number of children participating in these school breakfast programs has grown steadily. So in 2000, there was approximately 7.5 million children participating. That's almost doubled to 12.85 million in 2012. So now approximately 23% of American children between the ages of 5 and 18 participate in school breakfast programs on a typical day. Now, there has been some challenges to getting children to eat breakfast. A lot of times parents don't feed children either due to lack of time or even money and resources. And the school nutrition programs have helped to overcome these challenges. They actually offer breakfast in many different ways. So for those that are in a rush, children are getting to school at the last minute, they've developed a lot of breakfast on the go programs. So they will have maybe kiosks in the hallways where children can pick up breakfast quickly, breakfast vending machines, and even breakfast in the classroom. There are some schools that are offering breakfast in the classroom. So there has been a big change in breakfast at schools due to this awareness of the importance of breakfast and that so many children are missing out. To talk about the third point, that more and more people are eating breakfast away from home. In fact, about 14% of Americans now eat breakfast away from home. In 2010, there were over 12 billion morning meals served at U.S. restaurants, and 80% of restaurant morning meals were actually purchased from quick service restaurants. Between 2009 and 2011, the number of breakfast menu items has dramatically increased by about 24.2%. And the biggest increase has been actually in the breakfast sandwich, because after coffee, the most favorite morning menu item is the breakfast sandwich. Last year, actually, this was reported in USA Today, that last year nearly half of all breakfasts ordered at restaurants included a breakfast sandwich. And you compare this to, in 1989, only 23% of breakfast included a sandwich. So it's a very popular item that's growing in quick serve restaurants. Actually, Kellogg looked into what consumers are hearing about when breakfast is discussed, and we found that actually 2/3 of the consumer media conversation about breakfast is really focused on these new fast food menu options that are out there. So, the breakfast is really changing with these new on-the-go quick service options that are out there. So this is just to give you an idea of some of the changing nature of breakfast over the past decade or so. And now I'm going to turn it over to Carol to discuss why it's important to bring people back to breakfast, and particularly a cereal breakfast and the health benefits that result from that. So Carol?
Hello everyone, I'm Carol Byrd-Bredbenner, and this next section we're going to talk about the latest research related to the role of breakfast and breakfast cereal on health. Breakfast, especially those that include cereal, are associated with several health benefits. So in this section we're going to talk about three main areas. One is the health benefits of eating breakfast in general. The second one is health benefits of having cereal for breakfast. And the third area is the health benefits of cereal breakfast on BMI, digestive health, and metabolic syndrome. As many of you know, eating breakfast is associated with a number of health benefits. For example, when we talk about kids, those who eat breakfast tend to get more fiber, calcium, vitamins A and C, riboflavin, zinc, and iron in their diet than those who skip breakfast. Adult breakfast eaters get benefits too. For example, they get more nutrients in their diet, they eat fewer calories, and they have less fat and cholesterol throughout the day than those who don't eat breakfast. A second important benefit is that kids and adults who eat breakfast also tend to lead healthier lifestyles. For instance, they're more likely to have healthy food choices throughout the day and be more physically active than breakfast skippers. On the other hand, when kids and teens skip breakfast, they tend to eat less nutrient-dense foods throughout the day, and they don't meet the recommendations for fruit and vegetable intake. Breakfast skippers also seem to engage in other unhealthy behaviors. Both adult and adolescent skippers are more likely to smoke, drink alcohol, and not exercise enough. A third really important benefit is the effect of eating breakfast on school performance. For more than 25 years, researchers have investigated how eating breakfast affects school performance. Study findings show that breakfast helps kids concentrate and do better in school. Kids who eat breakfast have better long-term and short-term memory, and they're better able to recall information than those who don't eat breakfast. Breakfast eaters also tend to have better test grades and school attendance, and they even have better moods. Let's take a specific look at cereal breakfast and how they benefit us in terms of health. There are three areas that are important to consider. One is body weight and BMI, a second is digestive health, and a third is cardiometabolic health. And as you'll see in the coming slides, these associations are important to consider when we look at cereal breakfast and lower rates of obesity and overweight and lower BMIs. We also see that fiber-containing foods, including ready-to-eat breakfast cereal, improve and maintain digestive health, and metabolic syndrome is less common among cereal eaters. Let's talk first about cereal breakfast and body weight and BMI. A number of studies have shown that cereal eaters tend to have lower BMIs and are less likely to be overweight. Some new research that was recently published in the Journal of Aging Research and Clinical Practice adds to the growing evidence that adults between the ages of 19 and 50 who eat ready-to-eat cereal have lower body weight, lower BMI, and smaller waistlines than breakfast skippers do. Adults eating ready-to-eat breakfast cereals also have fewer risk factors for metabolic syndrome, which is a combination of disorders that raise the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. Another recent study that was published in the peer-reviewed Infant, Child, and Adolescent Nutrition Journal shows that kids 12 to 17 who started their day with a cereal breakfast, including pre-sweetened cereal, tended to have lower BMIs and were less likely to be overweight or obese than their peers who ate other foods for breakfast or who skipped the meal entirely. These data clearly illustrate that cereal breakfasts are an important way to start a healthy day, and they can be part of a healthy, long-term lifestyle. Plus, they really do help put to rest the myth that skipping breakfast helps people lose weight. Now, let's look at a second health benefit associated with cereal breakfast, which is fiber-containing foods, including breakfast cereals, help improve and maintain digestive health. Research evidence is clear that there is a role for fiber-containing foods, including ready-to-eat breakfast cereals, in improving and maintaining digestive health. In the United States, grains are a very important source of fiber. In fact, if we look at the sources of fiber in the United States, ready-to-eat cereals in the top 5, and grain foods overall supply about 36% of the fiber in the U.S. diet. Fiber truly is a problem nutrient in the United States. Less than 7% of all Americans have a usual dietary fiber intake exceeding the adequate intake standard of 21 to 38 grams per day for adults. But according to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position paper on fiber, more than 70% think their fiber intake is about right. So that means there are 10 times more people thinking their fiber intake is right than really do have a good fiber intake or a usual fiber intake meeting the adequate intake. So we've got a real disconnect here between what consumers are actually getting and how well they think they're doing. This represents a really important opportunity for health professionals to help consumers overcome this misperception that they're getting sufficient fiber and help them identify some delicious sources of fiber they can easily incorporate into daily diets. So helping consumers increase fiber intake has some very important long-term implications because we know that chronic fiber shortfalls are associated with increased risk for many chronic diseases. Something as simple as increasing dietary fiber intake can result in major improvements in public health outcomes. An interesting new study just came out indicating that whole grain, ready-to-eat cereals are a quick, affordable, and enjoyable way to increase fiber intake. In fact, adults who ate whole grain, ready-to-eat cereal with 3 grams or more of fiber per serving get 42% more fiber at breakfast and 14% more fiber each day than those who don't eat these whole grain, ready-to-eat breakfast cereals. The last health benefit associated with cereal breakfast that we're going to touch on today is that cereal breakfasts are associated with a lower prevalence of metabolic syndrome. Research indicates that eating ready-to-eat cereals and other breakfasts are associated with more favorable anthropometric measurements, such as waist circumference, cardiometabolic measures, such as lower prevalence of elevated blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, and low HDL, and these all add up to a lower prevalence of risk factors for metabolic syndrome in adults between the ages of 19 and 50. When comparing other types of breakfast or no breakfast eaten to ready-to-eat cereal breakfast, those who eat ready-to-eat cereals have lower prevalence of elevated blood pressure, elevated waist circumference, elevated glucose, and metabolic syndrome. Study data clearly indicate that individuals who eat ready-to-eat cereals tend to have overall better biochemical markers, such as blood cholesterol, than those who do not eat breakfast at all or those who eat other breakfast foods. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa for the third objective.
Thank you. So in this next section, we're going to take a closer look at the nutrient contribution of breakfast cereals to nutrient intake. So the next slide just covers, this is what we're going to cover in this section. So we're going to discuss the nutritional value of a cereal breakfast, that it's a low-calorie, nutrient-rich breakfast choice. We're going to talk about the balance of calories and nutrients in a cereal breakfast. We're also going to talk a bit and elaborate a bit more on the benefits of fiber that Carol's already touched on as well, and also protein and the 4 other nutrients of need that have been identified by the dietary guidelines for Americans. We'll also talk a bit about America's fiber deficit and how cereal can help to fill that fiber gap. And then we'll also talk a bit about sugar and sodium in cereals and give you the truth about sugar and sodium. So just to give an overview of the benefits of a cereal breakfast, the multitude of benefits that they offer. So serving of cereal with skim milk is around 150 calories. So it's a lower calorie breakfast option than some other breakfast options that are out there. Cereal is also generally low in fat and a low cholesterol breakfast option. With 1 cup of milk, cereal provides a good source of protein and many key vitamins and minerals. Cereals can also be a very good source of fiber and whole grain. It's real important to look for fiber and whole grain on the label of a cereal to be sure you get a cereal that has those 2 components. And cereal also contains less sugar and sodium than many other breakfast choices. So if you compare it to things such as a muffin or a bagel with cream cheese or even the breakfast sandwiches that we mentioned are so much on the rise right now, cereal actually contains less sodium and sugar than some of those options. So the 2010 Dietary Guidelines for Americans included a recommendation to eat a nutrient-dense breakfast. And cereal really fits the bill here. It is a nutrient-dense breakfast. And in fact, studies show that when nutrients are missed at breakfast, people typically don't compensate for that loss during other meals. So we'll talk a little bit more about these nutrients that are provided by cereal and how when they're missed, people really don't make up for them during the rest of the day. The nutrient density of ready-to-eat cereals, many of which are fortified with vitamins and minerals, can be important contributors to overall diet quality as well. And we'll discuss this a bit on the next slide. We'll talk about some of the specific vitamins and minerals that ready-to-eat cereals can provide. So this graph shows the percent of select nutrients provided by ready-to-eat cereal in children ages 4 to 12. So when it comes to improved nutrient intake, cereal really does provide key nutrients for children with relatively few calories. So if you look at the percent of calories provided by cereal, you get about 3% of your daily calories for children. But if you look at the vitamins and minerals that are provided, you get upwards of 10, 20, and in some cases even 30% of the daily needs provided by ready-to-eat cereal. So remember when I said when they skip breakfast, they miss out on these nutrients and they don't really make up for them later in the day. So cereals can provide several important vitamins and minerals, making it an excellent breakfast choice, not just for children, but this is also true for adults. In fact, we talked about how it's so important for kids to eat breakfast and that so many of them now are skipping breakfast. And some of this may be due to living in a food insecure household, and food insecurity is a real issue, even here in the United States. And there was a recent article in the Journal of Hunger and Environmental Nutrition that actually showed children in food insecure households actually have better nutrient intake if they can have a cereal breakfast. And cereal is rich in nutrients and actually low in cost. So a serving of cereal and milk is only about 50 cents. So this could have a real impact on the nutrient intake, particularly of children in food insecure households. Now, choosing cereal is one of the easiest ways to have a low-calorie and nutrient-rich breakfast. 1/3 of moms feel that at least half of the milk their child consumes, if not more, is eaten with cereal. And I can tell you, as a mom of a toddler, I totally relate to this fact. It's very difficult to get kids to drink the milk that they need to drink, but when it's with cereal, they just gobble it right up. So I absolutely identify with this fact. And actually, serving a cereal with skim milk only has about 150 calories. So again, a very a good option when you're watching calories at breakfast. So if you compare it to some of the other breakfasts listed in that table, such as eggs, bacon, and toast, or ham and cheese, bagel with cream cheese, you get actually a lot less calories and a lot more nutrients in many cases. So on a calorie per calorie basis, you're getting more nutrients per calorie with cereals. So we're going to talk a little bit about fiber and elaborate a little bit more on the health benefits of fiber and how cereal can play a role in providing fiber. So there's a number of health benefits that have been associated with fiber, such as lowering cholesterol, improving regularity, helping to control blood glucose, a number of benefits associated with fiber. And actually, the 2010 Dietary Guidelines for Americans identified fiber as one of the nutrients of concern. If you want to go to the next slide, this was along with calcium, potassium, and vitamin D, along with fiber, are the 4 nutrients that were identified as nutrients of concern due to inadequate intake in the population. And if you look at cereal and a cup of milk, it can provide these 4 nutrients of concern, plus it also provides protein. The important thing here is to choose a cereal that has at least 3 grams of fiber. So it's very important to look at the fiber, at the nutrition facts panel for fiber, to make sure that the cereal has at least 3 grams of fiber. And don't assume that just because a cereal is whole grain that it is a good source of fiber. There are whole grain cereals that don't necessarily have a good source of fiber. So be sure to look for both of those, whole grain and at least 3 grams of fiber. I mentioned protein, and while it's not necessarily a nutrient of need, it actually is one of the most sought-after attributes in breakfast food. So 68% of people are looking for protein in their breakfast food, and this is second only to heart health as one of the other items that people look for most often in their breakfast foods. And protein is actually really important at breakfast. In fact, according to a new study in the NAJCN, people who enjoy breakfasts that are high in protein are actually less likely to snack later on high-fat foods in the evening. So just to remind you, as we've already talked about, according to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics position statement on fiber, there's a fiber deficit in America. Adult fiber intakes are 40 to 50% below recommended levels. And as Carol mentioned, 70% of people actually think they're getting enough fiber in their diet, when in actuality they're not meeting their fiber requirements. Women need 25 grams per day, and men should get 38 grams per day, according to the Institute of Medicine, and this is based on the 14 grams of fiber for every 1,000 calories. So on the next slide, it talks a little bit about how most people don't realize how much fiber they should be getting, and this might be part of the reason that they think they're doing okay on their fiber intake, is they really don't know how much they should be consuming. So as health professionals, it's so important to help people to understand how much they should be getting in their diet, to address their behavior, to address the knowledge and also perception gaps regarding fiber intake. So things such as whole grains, be sure to look for a good source of fiber with your whole grains, and helping people to understand how to get more fiber and how much fiber they actually do need over the course of the day. And a cereal breakfast is actually a great opportunity to increase fiber intake. So the study that Carol mentioned earlier about people who eat a cereal breakfast that includes at least 3 grams of fiber consume 42% more fiber at breakfast and 14% more fiber across the day. A similar study like this was done with children in Australia, and it showed very similar results, that children are more likely to meet their daily fiber requirements if they start their day with a breakfast cereal that has at least a source of fiber. So it's real important. Some ready-to-eat cereals are good sources of fiber, and some are excellent sources of fiber. And we've listed some there that you can, when you're talking to patients and you may be recommending something general, looking for bran cereals. Bran is a great source of fiber. Shredded wheat cereals, wheat flake cereals, and fiber-added cereals are all different options that are available to help people get fiber in their diet through breakfast. So now that we've talked a little bit about what cereal breakfast can provide, let's talk a little bit about what it doesn't necessarily provide that many people think that it does. So there's a myth that many cereals contain too much sugar to be good breakfast choices. And this next slide shows that actually ready-to-eat cereals only contribute actually less than 4% of daily added sugar intake in the U.S. population. And this, when you compare it to, for example, soda and energy drinks and sports drinks, this is about 1/10 of the sugar that's provided by those food groups. So cereal actually contributes minimally to added sugar consumption. Nevertheless, industry does listen and respond to consumers, and this is actually reflected in the next slide, where you see there's been a decline in the amount of sugar in ready-to-eat cereals. This is new research from the USDA that has since been published, and it looks at the change in sugar in ready-to-eat cereals between 2006 or 2005 to 2011, and you can see there's been a steady decline over that time in response to consumers wanting less sugar in cereals. So sugar content has been steadily decreasing in cereals. So talking a bit more now about sodium, there's also a misconception that cereal is high in sodium, when in fact cereal contributes only about 2% of the sodium in the U.S. diet, which is actually less than many other popular breakfast foods. If you compare cereal the amount of sodium in a serving of a typical cereal compared to other breakfast foods, you can see that cereal actually stacks up quite nicely against some of the other choices, such as muffins, bagels, breakfast sandwiches, etc. And again, sodium in cereals has also been steadily decreasing. So even though it's not a major source of sodium in the diet, the industry is always working to try to enhance the nutrient profile of cereals. And so you can see there's also been a steady decline in sodium in ready-to-eat cereals between 2005 and 2011. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Carol to wrap up and share some strategies with you to bring people back to breakfast.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. So far, we've talked about the important breakfast pattern changes that have occurred in the U.S., such as the key declines in breakfast consumption by adolescents, some of the food security challenges that are contributing to 1 in 5 kids not having breakfast every day in response to and the response of school nutrition programs to help them meet the need for breakfast by serving it at school, and some recent growth in eating away from home, primarily at fast food restaurants. In addition, we've noted that breakfast and breakfast cereal eaters have better health measures, especially that breakfast cereal eaters have lower weight and BMI, improved digestive health, and better cardiometabolic measures. We've also examined how a breakfast of cereal and milk makes very important contributions to nutrient intake for relatively few calories. Cereal and milk serve as a nutrient-dense breakfast as recommended by the dietary guidelines and includes protein plus 4 nutrients of concern. That's fiber, calcium, potassium, and vitamin D. So this final section, we're going to share some strategies and practical tips to help consumers get back to the basics and make breakfast a regular part of their daily routine. So in this section, we're going to talk about setting goals and helping clients understand how to set those goals, how to shape their strategies over time, and how to dispel some of those breakfast myths and challenges that consumers face. So let's start with looking at how health professionals can help consumers get back to the basics of a breakfast routine that fits their lifestyle and supports healthy eating. In the 2010 dietary guidelines, there were 2 overarching concepts that we should keep in mind here. One is focus on consuming nutrient-dense foods and beverages, and 2, maintain calorie balance. That is, keep those calories that are coming in line with the calories that are going out so that over time it's possible to achieve and maintain a healthy weight. To make changes like eating breakfast a strong habit throughout life, it helps to have some goals. SMART goals are really the way to go. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time-bound. An example that can apply to breakfast is to boost breakfast intake. It might be, over the next month, I will eat 1 bowl of cereal and half a banana for breakfast 3 times a week. Making lasting changes can be a challenge, so it really helps to set some shaping strategies. These can be very helpful for consumers. I know the individuals I work with, really it's hard to address a goal immediately, but if we can start making some small changes along the way, it really adds up to big, important changes. So to achieve that SMART goal of eating 1 bowl of cereal with milk and half banana 3 times a week, some shaping strategies might be to get ready the night before. Put out the bowls, glasses, spoons, bananas, and a cereal box on the kitchen counter, and when you get up, put the milk on the counter. That way it's really fast for the whole family to grab a healthy breakfast before they leave for the day. Another shaping strategy might be to explain to consumers why it is important for them to be a role model. Parents really have to show kids how important it is to eat a good breakfast by eating breakfast themselves. Kids are like sponges. They soak up information by watching everybody, and that's why they do so many of the same things they see parents and older siblings do. So if parents skip breakfast, kids think it's okay to skip it too. A third shaping strategy is to help parents realize that breakfast time can be family time, and most families these days just can't find enough time to get together. Eating breakfast together is a great way to check in before the day begins and make sure everybody is all set to have a successful day. Breakfast also provides an opportunity to build self-reliance in kids by letting them make their own bowl of cereal. Getting kids involved in making meals teaches them responsibility and gets them interested in eating. Cereal breakfasts are meals that even the youngest kids can help prepare. Another shaping strategy to reach that goal of eating breakfast more often might be to have a cereal tasting party. That is, get several cereals, taste them, figure out which ones you like the most, make it an event. Consumers can use this time to check out the labels to make sure that they are made with whole grains and to determine if they're good sources of fiber. That is, they have at least 3 grams of fiber per serving. Another shaping strategy is to put portions of cereal in plastic bags as grab-and-goes. This is really great for hectic mornings, and it also helps to keep calorie intake under control. Shaping strategies like these are examples that are practical and tangible, and really, when put together, can add up to success over time, helping families to reach that goal of eating breakfast more often. Myths and perceptions often get in the way of setting goals and using those shaping strategies we just talked about. Helping consumers gain knowledge and make behavior changes can help them overcome their challenges and reach the goal of eating breakfast every day. Some of the most common myths that we hear associated with breakfast are, skipping breakfast will help me lose weight, I just don't have time to eat breakfast, if it's whole grain, it's always a good source of fiber, and many cereals contain too much sugar to be a good breakfast choice. Now, let's take a look at the facts and some solutions for dispelling these misconceptions. So, when your client says, skipping breakfast will help me lose weight, it's really important to let them know that people who eat cereal for breakfast tend to weigh less and that they eat more nutritiously. A recent study reported that compared to breakfast eaters, breakfast skippers have less nutritious diets. Skippers ate more sweets, drank more soft drinks, ate fewer vegetables, and consumed less fruit. So it's really important to let those weight-conscious clients know that skipping breakfast is not an effective weight management strategy, and that eating a healthful breakfast may help them get their waistlines under control. When you're faced with the client who says, I just don't have time for breakfast, this is a great opportunity to let them know that cereal fits into busy lives. It takes seconds to get to the table. Almost everyone can make a bowl of cereal and milk, and we can make sure that we are teaching kids that healthy eating habits are important and doable even on the busiest morning. An added benefit is that cereal can be eaten on the go. Many of the moms that I work with tell me they keep small bags of cereal or boxes of cereal in the car to make sure kids get breakfast even when they are running late. Convenience is the #1 factor moms look for when ensuring their kids eat breakfast, and 9 out of 10 of them agree that cereal is a convenient breakfast choice. So helping clients identify convenient breakfast choices that are acceptable and delicious to them is critical to helping them reach their goal of eating breakfast every single day. You've probably heard consumers say, if it's whole grain, it must be a good source of fiber. This is a really good opportunity to help them understand that whole grain doesn't necessarily equal a good source of fiber. A recent survey conducted by Kellogg showed that many people believe this myth, and when they see whole grains, they think fiber. 3 out of 4 people, in fact, say that when they see whole grain on a food label, they believe the food is either a good or excellent source of fiber. Cereal is a quick, easy solution for clients looking to increase fiber, but it's important to encourage them to read the nutrition facts panel to be sure the food is delivering the fiber they're looking for. Keep in mind that a good source of fiber provides at least 10% of the daily value, and an excellent source provides at least 20%. Both adults and kids in the U.S. need to improve their fiber intake, as we've heard. A simple way to help kids fill the fiber gap and meet the recommended intake is to take small steps toward meeting this goal. Many nutrition professionals use the age plus 5 approach. Start with the age of the child and add 5. A good rule of thumb is to use this particular method of adding age plus 5. For example, if you have a 5-year-old, they should get at least 10 grams of fiber a day. That's 5 years plus 5 grams equals 10 grams per day. After age 19, men and women should follow the guidelines for adults of 25 grams per day for women and 38 grams per day for men. So our last fact that we want to investigate, or our myth, is that many cereals contain too much sugar. You probably heard consumers say this, oh, there's just too much sugar in cereal to be a good breakfast. And this presents a really great opportunity for health and nutrition professionals to help consumers realize that this simply isn't so. If we look at the added sugar in the American diet, remember the studies that Lisa was speaking about, less than 4% of the added sugar in the American diet is coming from cereal, and for kids this amount is less than 5%. If you look at the sugar that we see in orange juice or fruit-flavored yogurt, you can see that they tend to have much more sugar than cereal does. So if they're trying to manage sugar, you can let them know that breakfast cereal, including pre-sweetened cereals, can be part of a diet that manages sugar intake. You could also suggest that they might want to add fruit instead of table sugar to sweeten oatmeal or other cereals. And another important step for managing sugar is to promote the intake, a lower intake of sugary drinks and greater intakes of beverages like water and milk. So I'm going to pass it back to Lisa to wrap up.
So we thank you so much. This concludes our presentation. We did want to share with you, there's a few more resources and links on the next slide that will be available to you also when you're able to download the slides, I think next week sometime. So here's some references of where you can learn more, the kelloggnutrition.com website. We also have a research compendium called Cereal: The Complete Story, which has a lot of the research that you've heard here today, as well as some additional research that we just couldn't cover everything here today. So here's some of the resources and links you can go to. There's some additional resources. Some of these we mentioned as we were going through the slides, and some of these were also great resources for us to provide information in the slides. And
all right, this is Abby again, coming back to wrap us up finally and to address a couple of questions that were submitted over the course of the webinar. So let's start with a question that came in from Barbara. She says, on research that showed cereal eaters had lower BMI than breakfast skippers, did the type of cereal matter, such as the amount of sugar per serving?
That's actually a great question. Just to let you know, for example, the research we discussed that was in Infant, Child, and Adolescent Nutrition, the journal, actually showed that it didn't matter the type of cereal. In fact, even pre-sweetened cereals still showed children had lower BMIs, even if it was a pre-sweetened cereal that they consumed. So in general, the research, a lot of the research doesn't look at specific types of cereals, but for those that have, they've shown that it doesn't matter if it's it doesn't matter the type of cereal, even pre-sweetened cereals. Children will have a lower BMI.
All right, fantastic. We actually have another question from Barbara, and this one is a little more procedural. Her question was if there would be information and resources available for download. So would we be able to send along the slides or have the recording available for upload?
Yes, we will have the slides and a recording of the webinar available at the Kellogg Nutrition website with hopefully by next week, but definitely within 2 weeks. And also for people who weren't able to attend today, they will be able to watch the webinar again and still be able to get their continuing education units.
All right, thank you, Lisa. We have another question, and this comes from Charlotte. Do other countries or cultural eating patterns have better fiber intakes than ours? It seems that ours is pretty low.
Well, I'll go ahead and address that. There are some countries, for example, some European countries, that actually do, more people do actually meet their fiber recommendations. But actually, in general, in most developed countries and even in some underdeveloped or emerging markets, people don't meet their fiber requirements, and this is true for a lot of Europe, America, the Americas, South America, even Australia. A lot of people still do not meet their fiber requirements. So it's not an issue that's necessarily unique to the United States, although the United States definitely probably lags behind a number of other countries in that area, but it's actually an issue all around the globe.
Great. Thank you so much. We have another question from Yolanda. She says, I've heard that eating breakfast within 1 hour of waking up is best. Has anyone heard of this, and can you share your views on that idea?
This is Carol. As far as research goes, we don't really have any data to show that eating within a particular period of waking time makes a difference. Most of the studies that we have define breakfast a little more broadly as the first meal upon arising, eaten within usually a few hours after arising. So we don't have any hard data that I'm aware of related to that.
All right, thank you so much. We have another question here from, it looks like, Carolyn. You talked a lot about children. Are there any insights about older adults in breakfast behavior and their fiber intake?
Sure, we can address that. We did talk quite a bit about children here, and there has been a lot of research focusing on children, but there is also research focusing on adults as well. And a lot of the same things, lower BMI and body weight. So just making sure I have the question right. So there are insights about older adults and their breakfast behavior, and it follows a very similar pattern to children.
On the plus side for older adults, they tend to be much better at eating breakfast regularly than the younger adults. So that's a great behavior.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. It looks like we have another question, and I am just checking on who this might have come from. It looks like it may have come from Jessica. Her question is, some clients of mine find cereal to be a trigger food, meaning that once they start eating it, they can't stop. She's wondering if there's research on this.
I'll go ahead and address that. I'm not aware of any research that has looked at cereal as a trigger food, that once they eat they can't stop. I do know one thing they can do is some of the things that Carol recommended, portion it out. Sometimes if you grab the whole box of cereal and you start eating, you could end up eating more than you ever intended to because you have the whole box there. So portioning it out, pouring it out in the bowl, those are definitely some strategies. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think those are really good points. So stop points by measuring it out and putting in a plastic bag so that you know you've got a reminder, oh, I've eaten this amount already. And I think that's true for any kind of food that we're eating in out of a big container without portioning it out. Chips and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thank you, everyone, so much for calling in today. If there were any questions that we weren't able to answer, please take a look at kelloggnutrition.com. There will be more resources available there for you to take a look at. And again, thank you so much for calling in. We'll reach out with an email tomorrow or the day after with additional resources as well as places where you can download your CEU form. All right, if there are no further questions, again, thanks so much for your time. We'll wrap up right on time, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks again, and take care.